And we're live with our 263rd episode of Absolute AppSec. I'm Ken Johnson at CK Tricky on social media, joined by my co-host, Seth Law, at Seth Law on social media. Seth, say hi.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode. Ken and I are excited to be back as always. You'll see that we don't have a guest today. Figured that we would run an episode with the two of us talking about some news, some things that have been going on recently. But before we get into that, I do want to give a shout out to Redpoint Security today for being the sponsor. Redpoint specializes in code security by coders, which is bolstered by years of experience testing applications and conducting code reviews against all types of applications. Redpoint also offers secure code training to help ground your teams in better security practice across the development lifecycle. So check out redpointsecurity.com for more information and put your company on a path to better security. Thanks, Redpoint. Outside of that, I do want to bring up that there is another opportunity for secure code review training at DEF CON trainings in Seattle. That's coming up November 2nd and 3rd. It is a go. We have people that are signed up. There's going to be a few other sessions running at the same time. Ken and I will be in town in Bellevue November 2nd and 3rd to teach practical secure code review, the generative AI enhanced version of the course. We've been talking with Will and the team over at DEF CON, are excited to actually get back in person and do that. And we also will have additional trainings up and coming. So if you are interested, please check out training.absoluteappsec.com. I'm going to drop the link in here, or training.defcon.org. Either one of those, you can sign up. And yeah, we'd love to have you. We'd love to see you. Ken and I keep talking about how the generative AI bits are actually putting a lot of pressure on getting through the whole secure code review methodology in this course, just because it is so much that we're trying to cover in 2 days. It's a fire hose is really what it comes down to. And anybody that was on the most recent virtual or in the Melbourne training understands that, right? Like just, the ability to get through it all. That being said, the generative AI bits are extremely helpful, right? Like to me as a practice, to you as a practice, I know they are. Yeah, last thing before we jump into it, Ken, I did want to highlight, maybe it hasn't actually gone live yet. No, it hasn't. Never mind. We do have, I must not have pushed it live yet. We're going to have some Halloween merch on the merch store.
Cool.
A pair of Halloween Crocs and socks, basically, on some t-shirts and some other stuff. So that'll be live. It'll go out with the newsletter later this week. I'll make sure that it is pushed live.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So let me see. I'm
finding out all everybody else.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome.
This is what happens when we have like people on that stuff that we're just like, oh yeah. I'm like, yeah, put it together, go for it, right? So
that's so cool. Yeah, and I love Halloween. It's like super fun. Super fun times.
Super fun times, yes. Yeah, so we have a few articles that I know we wanted to cover. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I did want your take. There was a conversation that was going on yesterday in Slack before we get into the articles, the McDonald's one, which is hilarious to me. Sure. There was a conversation. It's always Andrew, right? He likes to stir the pot and ask questions. He brought up Kaido, first of all, right? He's trying to use it, teach people. Like, I've had a little experience there, but I really haven't had time to dig into it. The interesting thing, his statement here, it is pretty sad in some ways that structured web fuzzing isn't a core concept being talked about as much. I wondered what your thoughts on that are. Like, I know, you're doing more in-depth static analysis now, but as someone who has practiced as a pen tester, as a tester in the past, what are your thoughts on web fuzzing and the approaches that we take? And I know I'm putting you on the spot, so yeah.
Oh, well, I'm trying to catch up on By the way, it was funny that he mentioned Raft, which was like you and Nathan Hamill and Justin Engler and was
Greg
there
Fleischer. Yeah.
Greg Fleischer? Yeah, I knew there was somebody I was missing. Um, that's funny that he mentions Raft. I also think he mentioned that the state of Burp's cheat sheets really haven't changed much, right? Over time. Dynamic fuzzing's just kind of an interesting thing because you kind of trying to think about what I think about the state of fuzzing since I don't. It's been a few years since I've done a lot of fuzzing with the tooling that's out there, but I don't think it's changed much. I mean, I don't think that like the actual payloads have changed much. I do think that there have been complications with fuzzing in the sense that like client side JavaScript frameworks have introduced obviously some difficulty there with at least the spidering components. And so folks tried to work around that with like headless browsers that um, interact with various web components to get things to happen so that they can fuzz those things happening, those requests coming across the wire. But overall, I mean, it just, I guess, have you seen any huge innovations? I mean, I know that what's the name of that tool that people were using to oh gosh, oh thank you. What is that open source tool everyone's using for fuzzing dynamically? I cannot remember. You can nuclei. I think that's the one I'm
Oh,
thinking of.
nuclei.
Nuclei, right? Yeah. Yeah. So
But
nuclei was kind of
so
a
yeah, but nuclei again,
more
it's
recent.
like it's all based on like YAML. Okay. So I mean, part of the reason I bring this up,
Yeah, because I need you
I
to give your opinion because
yeah.
I'm a little
So
rusty.
yeah, I
Let's
mean,
say
this is
rusty. I
this
just what has happened that has been super new, that has changed
I
much is my main question.
yeah, well, and that's I think that was Andrew's point, right? Like that we're not concentrated on web fuzzing. This goes back to my sputter talk, right? Back in the 2015, 2016, whenever I gave that on like um, actually following fuzzing and QA testing principles for web applications. Um, and I don't know. I'm feeling the itch to revisit this, especially with some of the AI stuff that you and I have been doing, because I think there's better approaches to actually like building out the fuzz cases using LLMs as opposed to like what I was trying to do with Sputter in the past. Anyway, but what it gets down to is the fact that our our focus when we're testing dynamically, and even when we use something like nuclei, is full vulnerabilities and full exploit, right? Um, and like I take issue with this because it's like security issues are really just bugs that can be used in novel ways to actually cause a problem to occur. And um, full exploitation, while impressive to the rest of the security nerds, really isn't a software reliability problem. You know, I always feel like our focus in the industry at large is too much on exploitation and not enough on good programming practices. It's a misunderstanding that security folks have that, hey, unless a vulnerability can be exploited, then it's not an issue. Um, Man, and from my QA testing like developer background on this has always been, hey, if I can cause a flaw to occur, unexpected behavior in any way, I expect it to be fixed. I'm going to go fix that problem because it's a reliability issue. It falls under the crocs and socks of security, where it may not be a full exploitation like access control, RCE, whatever it is. But if there is an issue that causes reliability issues with an application, it causes availability issues, it causes, unexpected output, that should just be fixed in the general course of, hey, there is a software bug here that needs to be mitigated, right? Or needs to be resolved. Um, but we feel like we're special in some way from a security perspective because we have this ability to, exploit a system. And okay. So all that is background, right? For
Yeah,
fuzzing.
and I was just add to what you're saying though. The one thing I would argue though, kind of, is that if I'm going to tell a developer that something is broken, and I've done that dynamically, because it's one thing when you're talking about source code where you're not actually engaging with an interactive application, and you're just positing at what you're seeing will lead to the thing that the vulnerability that you're going to report, right? Pretty obvious in code. You say like, okay, this code, that code, string these thoughts together, like, or these actions together, these whatever things that this multi-step flow, whatever it is. If I do these things, presumably it should lead to whatever. But ultimately, in the code, you can see that user input goes here. We're doing something that's an anti-pattern, whatever the case is, right? Like I feel like that's usually can be more black and white in a sense, although sometimes it can be difficult to actually validate that there's a flaw. But ultimately, with dynamic testing, however, you're fuzzing a live thing, and it is behaving the way that it is behaving, right? If there's no guessing, right? I'm not looking at code and then saying, well, this is probably a vulnerability for these reasons, or maybe it's obvious, but in a lot of cases where it's more complex and nuanced, you're positing. And then dynamic testing has that validation bit. And the reason I'm saying this is that if I have discovered a vulnerability dynamically, if I have reported a vulnerability dynamically, I then have to give, or at least I would say, yeah, I kind of have to give the developer the reproduction steps as to how or what I did that led to the thing that I'm reporting, right? I'm thinking of bug bounties, like when we got bug bounties at GitHub submissions. Always easier if they give reproduction steps. Otherwise, we actually have to ask for them. Like, tell us exactly how you did whatever it is you did, what payloads you sent, what actions you took, and then we can give that to the developer. And again, if you're doing dynamic testing, that should be very easy to do. It's just a different world from the static side of the house in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. I don't know though, right? Like, I mean, I think part of our lack of web fuzzing and the use of payloads, right? Like exploit payloads in bug bounty and dynamic testing has led to a focus on, again, that full exploit chain. Exactly what you're saying, right? Like, okay, yeah, we're having to validate what's coming in from bug bounty people. We can't necessarily we can't look at the fringes of what's going on in the application and the weird behavior. We're only focused on the high value stuff that's exploit, like, oh, there's a full exploit here somebody could take advantage of. And I don't want to discount that is important, right? For a disciplined, mature organization that already has QA testing in place, that already has a number of these things, I would still argue that fuzz testing in a dynamic, staging, integration, whatever environment with traditional fuzzing techniques as opposed to exploit payloads is more valuable over time, because I feel like it nips the whole idea of these full exploit chains right before they can happen. It's not necessarily pushing left in the sense of shift left that we always talk about, or that the industry always talks about, but it's actually piggybacking on normal and known software development patterns to identify bugs before they become an issue. And if you go back to the waterfall methodology, and as much as we discount that and think that agile is the shit nowadays, it's not, right? There are reasons why waterfall did so well, right? It catches these sorts of things before we've actually pushed them live. And it doesn't mean that we're going to get back to traditional waterfall methodology where we're testing and we're running fuzz cases for months on end before we release a product. But that it is wholly appropriate for us to stand up a web instance, like an integration testing environment, use traditional fuzzing payloads, I like fuzz techniques to try and cause instability in an application that is unintended, and then fix that before it becomes a full issue. One of the reasons why, and I would argue, like one of the reasons why Apple and Microsoft pay so much for full exploits is because this is the approach they take underneath the hood. You know, they have IIS, they have applications that they're building on these frameworks. They're running traditional fuzzing techniques and traditional integration tests against these resources and these products, finding those vulnerabilities, eliminating them over time. I like take a look at the jailbreak community nowadays, right? Or the lack thereof. It's not possible to find a full exploit for iOS anymore. Or if it is so incredibly rare, because this is the approach that Apple has taken over years, is every time that there's a bug that pops up, they pay for it. It may not be a full exploit, but they pay for it. It's been found dynamically. They fix it in the code, and they iterate on that over and over and over again. As opposed to, hey, I'm just looking for cross-site scripting in my application, or whatever exploits are currently out there, whatever's hot in the bug bounty community, and those are the items that we're concentrating on. And I don't know where I'm really going with this, Ken, outside of like, I feel like it's a maturity thing. Yeah, and it's something that can be solved.
Well, all right. There's a few different, because we have there's actually like a few different interweaved concepts that are linked to some of the articles we're going to discuss. One of them is going to talk about how the majority of flaws tend to come from new code, and that over time, older code, on average, you tend to see a decrease in vulnerabilities. So that's one concept. New code equals more often than not vulnerabilities. The second one is kind of around exploit development and releasing exploits, and the ethical questions around that, but more so reasons why it should be unnecessary. Some of the things in that article talk about, which I know we're going to get to all this. They talk about sort of like the unnecessary. It shouldn't be necessary to give the full exploit if you can show, which is a conversation that's been had. We talked about this before the show, which is a conversation that's been occurring for so long. That's how I knew the person who wrote it was a little bit newer to the industry, because I was like, no, we've been having that conversation for a long time, which is, do I need to actually go and exploit the thing in order for you to believe me that it's actually vulnerable, because I can tell that it's vulnerable for these reasons. So like, for instance, I throw certain characters in a payload, it responds a certain way. Okay, cool. If I project out what that could lead to with chaining together other things I know about the application, I know that there's a vulnerability, but maybe I don't want to give you, and I'm just kind of making this all up, but maybe I don't want to give you the exact. And I don't know why you would want to not give the exact payload, but maybe I don't want to give you the exact payload. Maybe I don't know. Like, this is going to be a whole other topic and discussion. But so tying those things together, the questions around how far should we go with our exploits when we think there's vulnerabilities, and then new code. And then you mentioned a couple things. So you mentioned you mentioned waterfall. You mentioned that the benefit to waterfall is at least the code gets more thoroughly vetted before being released. So right then and there, I will save on that one. I have my own thoughts, right? Like, I think.
Come on, disagree with me, Ken.
I do think, well, so because I don't think that, all right, there's a question of the value of security coverage, QA coverage, and then the speed of shipping, right?
Yeah.
And keeping up with things.
It's a balance. Yeah.
So it's a balance. So like in practice, in the real world, obviously, yeah, it'd be awesome if I could like test something for 6 months before it went out the door. You and I both know the reality is that is not happening. That is not coming back. I mean, obviously, that's why I focused on with this. I mean, yeah, I'll just bring up the fact that, I built a product that focused primarily on new code shipping and making sure that code's secure. Well, why did I do that? Because my experience, I don't need Google's research to tell me that new code is where vulnerabilities tend to exist, right? I believe that wholeheartedly, but I don't think that, I think to date tooling has kind of just been awful for taking into account the intention behind new code that's changing and how that might impact existing things we know about the application, right? The context we already have about the application. I think they've been terrible in that regard. So like, obviously I built with James a company that is literally trying to address that. So you got my full attention there. I know that I know that you know that we can't, obviously we're not going, you even said it, we're not going back to waterfall or anything like that, but there does need to be a better approach for new code that's shipping, keeping up with the pace of that. And the answer has been what to date? It's been dynamic tooling or SaaS tooling or IaaS tooling or whatever to try and fit into pipelines so that, new code ships. We do a dynamic scan, we do a SaaS scan. IaaS protects us at, runtime, roughly supposed to anyways, give us these, these guarantees and tell us that things are happening that we're not concerned, or that we should be concerned about, that shouldn't be happening. In any case, when it comes to dynamic testing specifically with new code, I think the two main drawbacks I see are, one, sending contextually irrelevant payloads to applications given what has changed. So like the new code specifically, like the payloads for the tech stack that you're sending those payloads to, does it make sense? Does it make sense given what we know about the behavior and intention behind that code? The second one would be just plain old, like, what payloads or what parts of the application do we fuzz? Because there are so many changes that occur that are not even exposing more attack surface. There's not even more user input or more places where user input's being taken, in a lot of cases anyways, and then, being processed in some way. Instead, a lot of times, it's incremental updates to libraries, or it's changing make files or whatever, migration files, or, changes to model, like, data store type things. There's a lot of changes that occur to now. But unfortunately, what happens is, as you and I both well know, is that it doesn't matter. There's no intelligence there. It's just like new code was pushed, scan again. And that leads to longer. This brings into, this is why your bug ticket, or part of a small part of why your bug ticketing systems start to get overloaded. Developers start to see this noise and they're annoyed. It takes a long time to run these scans. I think there are a couple companies, like, I know we're going to have Kindred McQuaid on at some point from Night Vision, I believe, Night Vision, who's hopefully going to like tell us how they're handling that kind of situation. But yeah, anyways, I'm going off because there's like so many different concepts, and when you said a lot of things, I'm like, man, there's like,
I know,
like 50 different points I could break down here with you. Yeah, so anyways, I'll pause there. We've got a lot to cover.
No, I know. Well, and part of this is, right, like, when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? And so we've again, I go back to, as an industry, we've become so hyper focused on vulnerabilities and not necessarily the software bugs underneath them that result in those vulnerabilities and then subsequently their exploits. And that's Andrew's point. And I did post some of that, like I quoted him in the chat, right? That he doesn't see good tooling around inline mutations as a standard check. People get so focused on looking for vulnerabilities, they forget what makes things vulnerable to attack in the first place. And then he makes another point about, like, hey, I should be able to just point at these parameters. But part of this is like, and I appreciate what you're doing over at Dry Run, right? Like, you're giving it context. It's understanding the context of what's changed in an application and testing those changes in and of themselves, as opposed to, oh, well, I'm just going to run through this same list of payloads that I did against everything else, which is what dynamic tools have done in the past, the hammer that we've used. And if it finds something, I'm going to flag it, but it's not necessarily, it doesn't take context into account. And in the past, we've traditionally relied on, again, the integration test, the QA testers in the waterfall methodology to do that sort of analysis for us, right? Like they are, hey, they've got a list of these are all the tests that need to be built. We've got a user input form. I know that X, Y, and Z needs to be accepted. And then I iterate on that and I fuzz that. You know, when I'm looking at a traditional like green screen application for a mainframe, right? Like that was a traditional activity that occurred. It even occurred when I worked at like financial services firms. We're accepting data. We know that data has to look like X, Y, and Z. So we're going to actually fuzz our APIs or our input process that what happens when data comes in that is unexpected, right? Like that sort of thing occurred on a regular basis. And yet we have shifted the focus to look at the vulnerabilities in the web space specifically, and even in the API space and any of the RESTful APIs, GraphQL, right? Like whatever it is, we have shifted our thinking on what is appropriate for a security test or a QA test, because again, security testing is just QA testing. And that's why it gets me so riled up, right? You know, again, it's like logging, right? You want to talk about QA testing. I love talking about QA testing because it's so damn boring, but it actually pulls up very, very good points and it makes your software better, right?
A real story, real quick to reinforce what you're saying. This is hilarious because what's Tuesday, right? So last Sunday morning, a couple days ago, I drove to, I do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So, they have these open mats, which are like, you can, anybody from different places can go and try and train with people from different schools and all that, right? So I went to one of these and it was like a 40-minute drive. So anyways, I drove with one of the other folks from my gym. Well, we got to talking. I've never asked, I don't talk a lot about what people do outside of that,
Yeah.
right? Like their careers or whatever. I've known this guy for a while. I didn't realize that he's in QA. So I started asking him, like, what do you do actually? Like, what's your, I know what QA is, but like, yeah, what's your process? How do you go about it? And he's like, I really honestly, I dream up scenarios about how to just break it and make it not work right, and just the weird ways that I could use an application. And I'm listening to him go on and on. And at the end of it, I go, dude, that's exactly what we do in security. I was like,
Yeah.
it's no different. I'm like,
Yep.
that's literally what we do. We tend to look for, obviously like ways to take advantage of these misbehaviors in the application. But, it's all the same basically. We're trying to use it for an advantage. You're also trying to use it for a different type of advantage. You're trying to
Yeah.
suss this stuff out before somebody else. We're trying to figure it out before somebody else. And anyways, just the more he talked, I was like, wow. And I actually told him about you. I was like, this is actually a phrase that, my co-host, I told him about the podcast, and I was like, yeah, Seth has this quote. I think it's, listening to you, it's definitely true. Anyways,
Yeah.
a little side story.
Well, and yeah, again, right? Like from a career perspective, right? Like getting into QA testing is probably not. It was never one of those sexy, right? Like security has always been like, oh, like everyone wants to do security and break stuff, but no one wants to go into, oh, I have a laundry list of items that I have to go QA test for whatever reason, right? Like, and I think it is just the exploitation factor. We do have vulnerabilities that can lead to other very interesting things. So anyway,
Yeah,
that was
I
not
agree.
a planned topic for us today, right? Like
Nope.
yeah, no. Welcome to the podcast if this is your first time. Yeah. Any final thoughts there? Like I know I won't be able to put a bow on it. I am looking at some like new talks and new research on that side of things though. And you and I'm sure we'll be talking from there again, like even using things like Project Nuclei from Project Discovery. It actually helps speed up this process if you are doing or looking to do that sort of thing, but it still is a manual process to create a lot of it. So it's hard basically, but you should be thinking about it if you are involved in SDLC planning at some point.
Yeah. I would say that the last point I'd probably say though on dynamic testing is that it shines especially when you have this very specific, like when James Kettle came on and spoke with us about how he does his research. Like he finds like, yeah, response splitting payloads that make sense given his lab environment, and then he wires that all up in Burp, and then can scan across the internet for just that one thing and just scan 10,000 different apps and see which ones are actually vulnerable. And that's a really, really good use case if you have a very pointed exploit. You've built that in sort of your lab. You know how different web servers respond, different web stacks, or at least how they should respond and what the payload should look like. And then you just go and you vet that in real time. That makes sense. What doesn't make sense is scanning an entire application for some minor code changes that maybe like don't even have any user supplied input coming in and being processed in any way, or don't. Obviously that's not always the only thing that can go wrong. Yeah, clearly you can add code that, I don't know, maybe all you're doing is changing, or actually not maybe all you're doing, maybe you're adding a library, but that library now has some routes you didn't know about. It's not obvious, and maybe it's got some like administrative dashboard things or whatever. I don't know. I could probably dream up different scenarios, but I know that there are edge cases where, anyways, it's a hard problem to solve. I just don't think you should scan the entire app when there's like minor code changes. So moving on to the next topics though, I was curious, like which of these other ones you wanted to start with. There's the Google one on eliminating memory safety vulnerabilities and some of the research there, which really just reinforces what we had just talked about. There's the why I don't, right, exploits. There's the McDonald's ones, which I think is hilarious. That's a great. Let's do that. Yeah, let's do this one. It's great.
Trusting clients.
I was going to ask you if you give a summary, if you could give a summary on this one, or if you want me to. I'm too cool too, but yeah, whatever you want to do.
Yeah. So this is this one it was entertaining to me, right? Like especially coming from the perspective of doing mobile security assessments, right? Seeing so many mobile applications that are out there, and actually like how they are protected against jailbreaking or rooting in the on Android, what sort of protections are actually there. And it's also a good study in threat versus how do I want to say this, right? Like threat modeling, I guess, right? Like does the security you build into an application warrant the amount of threat that exists for that application, right? Or for that business, right? Whoa, sorry, and I just like lost my. Did that just die?
What died?
Oh, sorry. Like my one. Yeah, doesn't matter. I mean, I'm still here. So
okay.
Yeah. So like there's all of this like functionality, like initially like he's talking about blink.dev. There's a message of like how to like actually like introduce security into native wallet applications within Chromium and like the security issues that exist there. So we're talking like real money, right? And
yes,
my understanding,
someone being frustrated
started an internal screaming and then meet the McDonald's application. And all of this list that you're looking at here are actually things that developers put into place to prevent basically rooted phones from using an application, right? From logging in or doing anything. Now, when I go back to threat on this, because it's the McDonald's application, right? There is a little bit of there's not. I don't think you can pay through the application anymore. I think they just do NFC or like scanning. But it's been a while. I don't know. Like, are you a user of the McDonald's app?
No. I did find if you scroll back up though, it did make me laugh about that whole quote in the beginning, which was like basically this developer from the Google group saying like, yeah, I don't like how they redirect me to the secure versions out of Chrome and Safari to
Mhm.
their individual wallets. So like instead, I just want to build this into the into Chrome.
Yeah.
And I
We're
was
just
like,
gonna build a secure.
or building the native. Yeah. I was like, and then yeah, that's where the rest of this all kind of rabbit hole goes down, which is like, okay, so you don't want to use it's too difficult to go to a secure wallet. All right. Well, here's what McDonald's did to
This.
handle this, and what a lot of people do,
Yep.
right, is this janky client side crap that you do to them checking all these different things you see in front of you, which are like the name of your TWRP for your storage, and if you're using
Yep.
this apps library, what is it, com.topjohnwoo.magisk, and
Yep.
then all these different things, and that's how it checks. Like, okay, well, so you're definitely not rooted, right? You're definitely not using
Never
something
using.
else. Yeah, to to whatever have more permissions than you should on the app. I don't know. It just kind of cracked me up how
Yeah.
McDonald's was kind of handling that. Um,
Well,
anyways, sorry.
yeah, it does. It's like, yeah, you have to pay full price if you're running any of these things. And this even goes to the level of you have a developer build of Pixel, like Android on your device. It does these things like TWRP, Magisk. These are yeah. These are standard features for a development, a developer's Android device to be able to develop on Android, right? Like you have your Android Studio, but the Pixel that I have like sitting on my desk right now has this stuff installed on it. And I run into this very frequently when testing mobile applications that when they start to introduce some of these like detection mechanisms, it becomes very difficult to test an application inside of a developer environment without like basically having a pristine Android install on a device, which eliminates some of the ability to actually test. And I know we've had this discussion, a long time ago, right? Like on the mobile side of things, from a jailbreak perspective, from an Android rooting perspective, but it's still going on. And this is very true to life, right? Um, and this
The
just
idea
cracked
is
me up.
that you can't do the coupon flow if you're using a device that has any of these things. So it's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
you can't get your McDonald's coupon now. Come on, man, I need that free Big Mac. Like, play
You can't
nice.
build rewards, but you can't build rewards points, right? Oh no, right? Like it also means you probably can't look for flaws and game the system. But I, like like is their threat really that big? I don't know, right? Like maybe in other countries, I don't know what it is, but really, right?
Yeah,
Like
and
MBA,
let me
yeah.
ask you, if you're a mobile, you're a mobile security guy. If you start to see that a client is going through these hoops to protect itself, what does that instinctually bring up inside your head? Like, what are the things that you start to believe about this app when you see it's got these kinds of checks in it?
Okay, number one, it's been attacked in the past. Number two, they haven't put the proper protections in place in the API to prevent this from happening. You're doing it in the wrong place. The apps that I see that are well done on the client side are basically a trust no one situation, right? Yeah, you can run this on whatever you want because we're going to validate it behind the scenes where we have full control. We're trying to induce, like, I mean, McDonald's at this point is almost better off producing their own version of Android and selling that at McDonald's in order to protect that experience than it is to like try and operate in the environment that Google has given them, right? Um, yeah, and this is it, like that point that he makes right there, that this is more annoying than any financial app he's had, right? mbank.pl, it looks like he's in, Poland, right? Like it uses the Play Integrity API, and that's to use contactless payments. And the rest of the app works, right? Like, so there might be some functionality that is broken if there is, like, if you are using a rooted device, because some of that contactless payment stuff and the play integrity stuff won't actually like fire if it recognizes that it is in a insecure environment, which is exactly what we want to see, right?
So just to pause there though, so so it sounds like play integrity is a native to Android API that just exists, and this is Android. It sounds, and just correct me if I'm wrong here. I want to clarify for myself, actually, not just the listeners. So if Android built in a root detection API, and the idea is that Android itself doesn't want contactless payments to occur if you're rooted, if you have a rooted device, and presumably, now this is where I really need your opinion. That's to prevent a compromise of the secure wallet interactions or something of that nature.
Well, it's not it's not just secure wallet, right? Like, and I posted the link for the play integrity stuff, right? Like, but it's basically to ensure, like, it's for games and other things to make sure that your application is not being manipulated in the Android environment outside of what you intended, right? Like, so think about, it's basically signing the binary, and then anything that changes that or the environment doesn't meet those integrity standards, then Android allows you to disable functionality, right? Which is what way you would expect, right?
Right.
And so, like, yeah, if you see that you are running in an environment where, like, oh, it could be that they're using a stolen card or whatever it is, you can actually limit that action from happening. But instead, honestly, it feels like McDonald's took advice from somebody about 10 years ago to build out what they've done, and haven't kept up with the times, I guess, right? Like, so the other applications that he mentions, the like IKO, seeing that I have root asset, they disable logging and biometry, require you to log in with a PIN code. They're doing other things to make sure that you're still who you say you are. One just says, hey, maybe you shouldn't run this in a rooted environment. You're taking risks you shouldn't. Yeah. But yeah, McDonald's only, displays a guarantee message. Yeah.
Yeah, and then they kind of get into like, but why are they doing this? Now, this is, by the way, hilarious. So if you buy 3 bottles of Coke and then you enter the 3 codes from the 3 bottles of Coke into the Coca-Cola app, then you get another code. And that's the code that you put into the McDonald's app. And if you put that code in the McDonald's app, you get a free meal with a Big Mac, which is okay, assuming you like Big Macs, but all right, that's a lot of work to get a free Big Mac meal. Maybe you just really like free Big Mac meals. But anyways, which is, by the way, can I just talk about the psychology part just real briefly? That's actually why I think this all exists. I think someone in sales, in marketing was like, we've got an idea. Like, you guys don't understand. This is going to be so cool. You got 2 weeks to like build the functionality for it, or, a month or whatever. And, my guess is they had whoever build that thing in a very short period of time, and they're like, yeah, this is probably for like a free Big Mac meal. This is probably good enough. Also, they may have not even understood like that, because they talk about how they exploited this at the bottom, which is kind of cool in a way. Like, the assumption was that that WebView was never going to go outside of places that McDonald's control. And obviously at the bottom of this article, they talk about, no, that's not true. Like, they find the link to Google's so they go to the app, they go to the privacy policy, that opens a web view. You find like a link to Google's privacy policy, tap on the Google link, the Google image, to get to google.com proper from there. So you're now in a web view flow that, like, people are like, oh, I didn't expect that. And then just make sure that you navigate to an external link from there that can do this JavaScript, which is cola.offeractivation.send, gives a loyalty ID, a reward ID, and then boom, you've got inside the mobile app now, you've just told it, add to my loyalty account this amount of points, or maybe reward ID is tapped to connected to a specific reward. I don't know. But in any case, that's all you got to do is get the app to navigate to somewhere where you can push JavaScript that will just put that, like put those rewards in your account, which is hilarious.
Yeah.
And that makes sense as to why. And I love all the bypasses for all those checks they explain next in the McDonald's app. But yeah, it's kind of silly. It's like, yeah, of course you went through all that work to like make sure people couldn't do a single thing outside of the flow you expected, because that flow that you have is like brittle as hell.
Yeah.
From a but again, it's like, anyways, I could, I could go into the other side of this, which is like, what are you trying to protect versus what are you getting from that? And but anyways, all right, I'll pause there. So what do you think about the exploit, but also like the you can just comply with the check sections here, which is hilarious, naming your TWRP backup directory name, et cetera, et cetera.
So it's these are the traditional routes that we have played with, like, so in the jailbreak community and the, on the Android root side for, they have this concepts of hiding your environment from an application so that it will run as intended, right? And that's exactly what you're doing here, right? You're just like, hey, what are the hoops that I need to jump through in order to run this application in an unprotected environment? Right? Obviously, fairly easy. You just have to figure out what exactly it is. I mean, they do mention at the very bottom, there's this one project that's this Zygisk deny list, right? Which is basically a wrapper or a proxy that you're running the application inside of almost like a virtual environment to rename all these things so it looks like it's running in a pristine environment instead of a rooted environment, right? Like that's all that it does. And you could easily add some of these items to that in order to get around it. But still, it's, these are the games that we end up playing, or that I end up seeing in the mobile side of things, that, again, does the risk actually warrant it? And then they would be better off looking at the back end and this web view, like this whole infrastructure. The protection doesn't exist there that actually should exist, because we're not doing the lookups properly. We're not doing validations properly behind the scenes, and we're trusting the client too much, right? It's a traditional problem that we've seen on the web side of things for how many years now, right?
Yeah, since I'll tell you exactly when. I believe 1995 is when JavaScript was introduced. So since then.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. You could just not run the check.
Did I just remind you of your age again?
Yeah.
You just got that nihilistic. Yeah. Yeah, it has been almost 30 years. Damn it.
Hey.
Anyway, sorry. Good times. But no, I mean, yeah, this is even in the mobile space, client side controls. It's just anytime you're just putting too much weight into the client being able to prevent bad things from happening, you're absolutely setting yourself up for failure. There's always a way around it. That is literally all of what our job is proving there's always a way around it.
Yeah. Yep. Well, and I mean, but will it at least stop fraud? No. Right? Like,
no.
the answer, hell no.
Not at all.
And it's funny. It's funny that this pops up because, like, on social media, the algorithms have figured out, like, what I'm interested in, because I keep getting like videos and advertisement for, like, oh, here's, like, you can put 30 iPhone, like they're trying to sell me like mobile farms, right? And of like, oh, look, like we can put all of these iPhone motherboards into this one system, power them all, and then it gives you a UI to actually run them, so you don't have to do this, right? Like, but I'm getting those sorts of advertisements on, like, social media apps for me now, after like doing so much mobile stuff and interacting with mobile research topics. It's like, oh, I want to start a mobile farm of gaming whatever system is out there. But yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Anyhow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
Well, I
yeah.
know, I don't know if there's a bow to be put on this, but I know that we've got one other article that we want to
Yes,
get
we
to.
definitely want to
Well,
talk about.
yeah, because I think that's so. I think this. I assume you're talking about the same one, the secrets one. I assume.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
So that one is like useful just set this up for anybody else listening, or for anybody else, for the listeners to set this up. Uh, just know that this is a great article. If any developer or anyone ever asks you, like, why shouldn't I put environment variables into a .env file? This should be in your arsenal as as a reference point. You don't have to even answer it anymore. You can just give them this link because it's pretty comprehensive as to all the ways that things go wrong when secrets get leaked. But do you want to add some flavor here, Seth? Or oh yeah, perfect. You put it into general. Thank you in Slack.
Yep. Yep. I dropped it into Slack as well because I mean, this is a great resource because, like, I mean, we have secrets detection built into everything nowadays. It's been a very common refrain, and like we even talk about it in the secure code review course. Like we see these environment variables being used in applications all the time, and this article digs exactly into what are best practices and why shouldn't you be using environment variables to store secrets, and comes up with a really good list of this is why, right? It comes up with these like 7 reasons of, hey, if you really need an argument against the use of environment variables for secrets management, here it is, right? um, the difficulty of actually rotating those secrets when something pops up, no logging on who is actually accessing those environment variables, the fact that if you uh, spawn a child process, it gets access to all of those environment variables, right? Like there's all of these things, and there's all these data leakage processes that actually occur in
Hey,
there.
yeah, they talk about like frameworks like Express, where if you don't
Mm-hmm.
explicitly set an environment variable that it's in production, it will, in an error, whenever it receives an error, it will actually dump out everything to include all these environment variables. It's definitely seen that. I've seen that in an application
Yeah.
before. I've seen that where OAuth client IDs and secrets were leaked, and this was an OAuth single sign-on proxy server, which is a thing and shouldn't have been. But in any case, it was, and the framework itself in the library, if it was missing, if it had an error and missing a certain thing, it just dumped out the entire environment variable. So frameworks leak it, like you were saying, logs leak it, or they get leaked in logs. Yeah, being committed to, I think there's the one case where it's in source code, maybe somebody gets access to the code base in some way, but also I think they gave an example where someone pushed it, just how like some file-based web servers, it's file-based. So like if I go to /.env on example.com, for instance, like I get like a .env file back. Same, Chris Gates talked about this before with .git repos. You used to find .git repos exposed on web applications, and then there was a tool that reconstructed based off of like the git commit hash
Yeah.
numbers. It would reconstruct the entire git repository. Just being accidentally exposed in that way, like so many ways that .envs can go wrong. Yeah, it's like
Yeah. It
this is
is.
the first time
Well,
I've
and
seen somebody put like a really long, comprehensive list with reference
yeah.
articles together about why this is bad.
Yeah, and I mean, you talk about frameworks, and we've seen this in Next.js and Nuxt and some of those that are out there that mesh the client and server side environments and
Yes.
code into a single repository. And this is the only one, like the example here that they're talking about, this like cyber news, the well, that's New England. Was that one? Nope. There's another one that's down here. Nope. Is it the Seneca? Crap. I'm trying to remember it. I was reading it, and now it's in here somewhere, the Nux stuff, but I'm missing where it's at. They're down into environment variables now. But from a wallet perspective, oh, here it is, right? Yeah. Main wallet was compromised, right? the private key got exposed because they were using Next.js and didn't realize that when they put a private key into a certain environment variable in Next.js, that it actually pushes that to the client, and it doesn't maintain that as a server side secret or server side environment variable. So of course it gets it exposed. And like I've seen this happen multiple times in Web3 projects where they're just moving so quickly, and then they don't realize that they've exposed their private key that maintains their, like, that is used for whatever, right? Like, there's smart contracts that are actually transferring money between wallets or, what have you. And as soon as it gets exposed, they then get drained because people are watching for it, right? And if you look in the client side code, it just shows up as a block of JavaScript so that it can easily be retrieved by Next.js or React on the front end in order to have that variable available to it.
Right.
Anyway,
being folk, like not knowing that if I put this here in this part of the, because like you're saying that the commingle front end back end, and depending on where you actually store things in the code base is whether or not it's actually going to be rendered, and you may not know, as a developer, you might make that mistake. It's definitely doable. For sure. There's definitely, and I think the other one that you mentioned, and he mentioned in the, or he, her, whoever, I don't know who wrote the article actually. They mentioned is that the God, now I lost my train of thought. The oh God. Yeah. See, that's what happens when you get older, Seth. You just lose your train of thought occasionally.
I wouldn't know. I'm still 25, right?
You're still 30 years of JavaScript. Yeah. I don't know what I was where I was going with that, but I'm sure it'll come back to me. In any case, very cool article.
Yeah, it's just a good. Yeah, you're right. Like it's good reference points, and then it goes into okay, what should you?
I know what I was going to say. Sorry, Seth. I know what I was going to say. You mentioned this, which is being able to access secrets in a way that it's logged and it's you can actually see who accessed what and when. I mean, for the most part, I think that's one of the biggest benefits that I enjoy is like, obviously there's lots of nuances in that you can make it look like the application's accessing that secret via certain techniques and so the auditing part has less value in that case. But for the most part, it's nice to be able to see if somebody actually like had to retrieve that secret for some way. Like for instance, if they went into, I don't know, like Secrets Manager or something and said like, I don't know, they logged in through the console and say retrieve the secret value. It's like, yeah, that's audited now. It's not in some env file in that code base that, I have no idea you could maybe look at the history of bash logs or something. But again, it's like so much easier when it's centralized. Rotation's easier, logging's easier, for access. It's just everything's easier if you just call out to a vault style service.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I mean, they talk about using, like, at the very least, using something like 1Password to runtime, whatever, into the environment, or using cloud. Like if you're in cloud anyway, using their secrets management service, or even better, like assigning IAM or roles to specific processes and actors in the cloud environment, and then allowing them to access the secret or the resource based on the role, right? Again, we're getting into authorization, but at the very least, then we have like authorization access control. We've got all the logging that's going on with it, just based on the environment that is set up. It takes a little bit more discipline to get to that point, though.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, and I think this is such a nice article to be able to share with people and put as part of your internal guidance even. So yeah, very cool. Awesome. Good research.
Yep.
Solid stuff.
Solid recommendations.
I know we're getting towards, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we are.
I know we're hitting about an hour, so I'm curious, any interesting things to talk about on your end? Any interesting updates? Just in general,
Any
anything you
interesting
wanted to?
updates? We didn't mention like places that we're going to be, right? Like I think that's
Mm,
probably the other thing. I am including that in or we are including that in the newsletter on a weekly basis, kind of like the upcoming events where you can meet us outside of Slack. Obviously, that's always something that is available. We do have a couple other articles that I will throw into the newsletter that were interesting to us this week that we didn't necessarily talk about. Um, for me personally, I will be at DeepSec in November in Vienna. That'll be awesome. I'm giving my modern versus old school talk. Yeah, I'm leaning into the I'm the old curmudgeon at this point, but it is interesting, right? I think we both are with the other talk that we are that we gave the keynote down in Melbourne, and that we will in the future, submit as
yeah,
well.
yeah. That one as a keynote is good, but it's to get down to the details. It requires a bit longer format. Like I don't know what it is about us, but we always seem to we take a 4-day course and put it into 2 days.
Two
We
days.
take a concept that takes like an hour and a half at least to explain it well, and we put it down to 25 minutes. But we're okay at doing that, I think. But yeah, it'd be nice to do that in a longer format with more explanations. So
Mhm.
definitely, I know we're gonna
Yep.
work towards that. I also wanted to mention for listeners that there is a jobs channel in our Slack. And it's always nice when you can share with a like-minded community roles that are open, or look for roles that are open. So I know that there are 2 roles, well, 3 technically, because I was also trying to hire in there, but there's 2 roles mentioned from Planet Art, cloud security engineer and AppSec engineer. I think that there are some other roles that have popped up in there as well. So, anyways, if you're it's that time of year, right? It's that time. I'm bringing this up because we all know that this is the time of the year that the last few months that people tend to start making changes or thinking about making changes. So yeah, I would say like check out that channel. And if you have roles, go in there and post them. Um,
Yep.
I don't think I have anything else besides that I kind of wanted to mention. You know. Oh, I guess
Okay.
we could tease out that we are working on a special course that is only generative AI, and it's for
Yes.
software security folks. It's only for software security folks. It's going to be showing some techniques on how to perform code analysis, like using LLMs for finding vulnerabilities, how to create automated threat model, um, attack or diagrams, and assess risk, lots of other things. So with some fairly advanced concepts. So that's coming out. We're really deep in the middle of building out that course. So yeah, we got some good things coming. Yeah, it's going to be an exciting fall, I suppose.
Yep. I mean, right now it's tentatively named harnessing LLMs for application security. Right. Like it may need to be like Seth and Ken's Wild Ride or something else, right? Like, I don't know.
I
We
don't
got to
know.
find
I'm
another.
not good at naming. I'm not good at naming things. I lean on everybody else for that. So
Yeah. Yeah. No worries. All right. Well, besides that, thanks again to Redpoint for sponsoring today. If you want to help sponsor the podcast, please reach out, info@absoluteappsec.com. We do have a sponsored prospectus, and there are advantages to advertising on the podcast. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's it for today, Kent. I guess we'll see everybody online, and yeah, we'll continue the conversation in Slack.
oh,
Mhm.
sorry. One last thing. We'll see everybody next week with Jeremy Long, who wrote Dependency Check, OWASP's dependency check. We're going to talk with him through that, what he's doing now, and it's going to be a great. Just so everybody knows, like A9 came out in I want to say it was 2012 to 2014, somewhere in there. And so I think it was 2012, and I think that's when dependency check came out too. And those two were closely related, right? So we, which is known vulnerable components, and then a dependency check from OWASP, really from Jeremy, came out at that same time. So definitely you're going to want to hear that next week. So tune in. He's going to be a great guest. I've been trying to get Jeremy on for the longest time. With his former employer, it was just a little harder to work everything out, but now we're good. So, man, really excited about this. This has been years in the making.
Yep. It'll be good. Jeremy's a good guy. It'll be a fun episode. That'll be next Thursday. Like, we did have to shift a little bit, as long as that
Thursday,
works for you. Yeah. As long as that works for you, Ken. Yeah. Sweet.
Cool.
All right. Good deal. We'll see everybody next week. Thanks so much.
See you.